Welcome to UX Stories. I'm your host, Lee Han Hicken. I've spent my career obsessed with how we understand what users actually think. When Chris and I helped scale user testing from zero to IPO, we thought we had it figured out. But AI has changed everything. The speed of building is now 10 times faster than the speed of listening. So Chris and I built Bayset. We want to use Vibe user testing to match the speed of Vibe coding. I'm here to talk to visionary leaders who want to deliver great experience to their customers.
Each time a user evaluates a feature flag because they're using your application, that evaluation is an analytical event that gets sent back to LaunchDarkly. We actually do 57 trillion.
Wow.
It's a massive amount of data. Now, obviously, some customers are doing a lot more than others, but if you think about it in those terms, there's a lot of untapped information about how people interact with your applications, what, where, and when within that data stream. And, a lot of folks aren't really tapping into it, and we're excited to kind of set them up to do it.
Interesting. I think about this traditionally when engineering and product team decide what feature to build. They apply a lot of qualitative research by, setting up calls with existing customers and interview them and understand what they want and a lot of interviews. And then maybe they will set up a prototype and ask them for feedbacks and then they build it. And your approach is more quantitative side and you're saying you did you already build a feature or not building it? Just like put feature flag there, pretending it's already built, and then based on what they do to indicate they have an interest on this feature flag. It's like, based on their intent of their action to infer that maybe they have the interest in that.
That's absolutely right. And I think the interesting thing about that too is it actually makes the qualitative research even more important in a lot of ways, because we're going to end up putting in the effort to build at least the first version, real version of this feature. And so it should be a valuable feature. But the flip side of that is we now have a very solid way to experiment and really understand the effect of that, which means that you may end up turning that feature off. And so you should be pretty sure that it's going to be good, but you also have risk mitigation involved and you have the tools we're putting the tools in your hands to understand what the real outcome of what you did was. I think the tough part could be the psychological part, which is, hey, you may have built something that is not doing what you intended it to do. And you have to coach people into understanding that, it's not a loss. You've learned something, you're going to pivot. But, that's probably the tough part.
What's your conclusion? Is it ready or still too early?
So I would say it is very early stage to really make it more useful, where the human, if I think as a human doing 100 tasks in a month, agent or these AI agents can solve or can using AI, we can automate the task and even do a 50% of that. I think we are not there yet, but technology and the overall our learning is going pretty fast. So now we know that how different understanding the context when user what they really want to do and how we can automate that entire thing. So it's like we have heard the story even earlier using RPAs, remote like robotic process automation, and now the same thing we are solving with agentic AI, but the problem is different. Earlier it were pretty much on the rule based. Now it's more as non-deterministic. So anything you don't know what should be the next step, that's why we rely on these AI agents, which can determine, okay, if I got an invoice, what next step I need to do that, which is not rule-based at all. So I would say that we have come along at that way, and I believe it's a very foreseeable future where we can see that agentic AI solutions would be part of this life of the enterprise, where as a human is also working along with an AI agents together, and they're solving these business problems. So I think soon you will see that, and that's not a distance far future.
That's interesting. So you're saying technology-wise is early stage still, but growing fast, and you're putting in human in the loop. I wanted to know, like, what about the people's mindset in terms of accepting these Gen AI technology? Because from my experience of seeing enterprise adopting AI technology, they put in additional security protocol for AI software or kind of procurement limitation for the AI softwares in the. Have you seen that coming? Like, enterprise still a little bit cautious about adopting AI compared to the regular SaaS product. Have you seen that as well?
Yes, I have seen that. And what we have start observing is that nowadays these companies have started building an AI. There's an AI committee, or
Mm.
there's a
Yeah,
uh,
AI committee. They had to
right,
vote. Right, right.
right. So that means that earlier you might have seen that, okay, there's a security up, like you go to the security committee who will approve that whether your product is security compliance or not, right? Now,
Uh-huh.
the similar way, you have the AI compliance or AI committee who will check your product, whether like how much data is going to the generic LLM, and how much is you are storing within your small language model, which is in
Mhm.
like tenantive data. So there's a lot of technicality. These experts from individual companies, I know that you won't see many still, but like whosoever is more aware that how AI could be vulnerable to their business data as well, they started building this AI committee or AI expert part of sitting there, and they are making sure that the product is AI compliance. So
Yeah.
we have started seeing the trend, and I would say this trend will grow like pretty fast.
Yeah.
Whosoever is adopting AI, they would definitely want to know that how this technology works as well. And security being another paramount here, because given that now the enterprise data would be also, we don't want any customer don't want their data to like use as a
Data for
training
LLM.
data.
Yeah, I see.
Correct,
Yes.
correct. So I think that's where these software vendors needs to be very cautious, like how and when they can leverage it, and how they have consent from if they're really using for training or not. So I think the transparency will be playing a key role, the adoption of these technologies, and the vendors who are pretty transparent and responsible AI, like, yes, I'm responsible for your data and for my AI and how it can be using, where all you can bring the human in the loop. So there's so many factors will be coming in.
Bottom line, what's the value for the users? Cool. So in a sense then, what do you think is the value of doing user testing?
The value of doing user testing, actually, there are many values. One of the biggest values that I found, I mean, first of all, how can I identify that user testing is something that is bringing value to me as a company, as a team of people working together? I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
give you, I can give you an example of like, once again, a very old school bank that I used to work for. And I remember I was just going to the C-level floor and knocking every single door and asking them, do you know what's user experience is, how it's measured? And I was just brainwashing everybody until they let me build the user experience lab within the bank.
Wow.
And we
Wow.
started testing everything inside. And month after we launched, and that was pre-COVID time. So we were talking about like physical interviews. People were coming in, and we were doing like physical interviews, Zoom interviews, and
Wow.
with eye checking and all that stuff. Obviously, none of that is not existing anymore. We have the digital tools for that, but that was old school. We had two rooms. One room where the researchers were and where basically we conducted the interviews, and another room hidden by the hidden mirror. So basically you would not see it from the room number one. I called it a torture room. Not the one where interviews are happening. That's not a torture. The torture is looking at the results of whatever you built. So in a month after that, when I realized that I cannot get into that room for the entire week because it's fully packed of C-level people, managers, designers, product people, development engineers, looking at what customers are trying to do with whatever product that we were testing at the time. Because like there are so many people involved in the process, and I'm like, yeah, I'm bringing value because now they have insights they have never thought before. So
Wow.
once again, obviously you need to check that they will not act on word on one particular customer, that's not something that needs to be put in the backlog. You need to validate all that and extract those jobs to be done out of the interest of one person and all of that, obviously. But when 7 out of the 8 respondents do not see a left side column in the 3-column interface, you know that you can put anything there. It's just waste of your space. You need to restructure everything for the better use of the space. And you cannot identify that means pre-launch. Obviously, you can have.
My guest today is very unique, is the one and only Alina Hernando Paleno, Director of UX Engineering at Agile Engineering. I'm really excited to speak to Alina, so I'm a little bit shaking here. She's a really rare leader who bridged the gap between the deep academic theory and massive scale execution. She actually developed the groundbreaking framework called the Contextual Eruptive Forecasting Model, CIFM, based on Robert Rosen's work on anticipatory systems. So, Alina, I'm actually obsessed learner of people. You actually created a way to actually forecast users' needs before they even arise. So that's actually a true aha moment where you actually realize that standard user testing wasn't enough. You need a way to predict a model to truly understand the human experience. So before we dive in, can you tell our listeners who are you, right? How did you create something so magical? Tell us all about this. I'm so excited here.
Okay, so a little bit about me. So, I've been a UX designer for the past 12 years, and I've worked with like corporations, startups, like you name it, like basically all scales of companies. And I've found this problem every time, and that is the generalization of users. We create user personas to generalize users. And that
Right.
doesn't only happen for us, it happens also for AI. So we have these huge databases with a bunch of information about different people, and people become numbers, they become stereotypes, they become a standardized version of a person, and that is something that as a professional I was very bothered about. And that takes me to the first reason I started working on this model that was fair machine learning. So currently, the models that we work with today, they have this generalized vision of who people are based on their age, on their even skin color, right, in sexual orientation. They have all of these things into these databases. They're almost impossible sometimes to clean up, and there are different ways that different people have suggested to make fair ML possible. But at the same time, they all came with like these little hiccups, And that's when I found Robert Rosen's anticipatory systems theory. And Robert Rosen's anticipatory systems was more about it's more about a biology concept than it is a computational concept, which is very rare. Okay, like, and even when I was at the conference, that was very interesting because everyone was talking about biology and I was there talking about computers. Okay, the idea of Robert Rosen was like how the universe anticipates itself, like even humans, everything, all systems anticipate themselves. Okay, like they anticipate the next movement constantly. Okay, we can go very deep into it, but I want to like just highlight the reasons I started working in this.
Okay.
And the CIFM is just an answer to both of those things, like fair ML and anticipatory systems. So anticipatory systems made me realize, okay, so what if we work with something that is so unique to each one of us that can anticipate the next movement and make technology not be this thing that you have to learn, but this thing that works with you. So instead of, because in the beginning, the idea was like, I want to build something that has like the consciousness of a human, And then I realized, why build a human? Why not build for humans? Why not build this thing that is an extension of us and that anticipates us, that works with us, alongside us, not something to replace humans, but something to help us reach higher, like reach just reach higher, like reach and need. It's such a great question. I think about it a lot because not only have I worked in EdTech, and not only am I working in the space of training models, but I also have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old at home that I teach. And to be very honest with you, there are patterns. If you were to teach a child, let's say, a new approach to solving math problems, the way you'd go about it is first help them understand the problem and make sure you're picking out pieces of information and context that are buried underneath. Make a list of those and then work back from a clear end state to the solution, apply the frameworks plug in the information and pieces, and then come to the right answer. And then finally, when you grade that answer, you actually look at it and you say, okay, is this accurate? Is it complete? Is it comprehensive? Is it legible? That's how you would define a rubric to say, yes, this is a good solution to a problem. Now you take that to a student that I built products for, but I was working in EdTech. Very similar patterns there. When you're building pedagogical patterns, you do want to work back from the topic or the domain, of course, that you're teaching. A science problem and a math problem presumably looks very different from a language or an arts problem. But you take the problem and you take the context of the domain and you define what good looks like through a rubric. And then you have a step-by-step approach in more STEM-focused areas, and in other areas you reward, creativity and innovation and expression. So you take now that forward, play the movie forward to AI models. Guess what? It actually doesn't look that different. When we are building models, there are different components to it. There's first a component of creating what you call a task that the model performs,
Yes.
which is basically defining your problem. Then you have a rubric, which is, okay, if you are to grade this particular task, how are you going to grade it? What are some of the criteria by which you're going to grade it? And then you create, like you would for a student, you would create mock questions or you would create practice exams. Similarly, for a model, you go out there and you create practice tests and you create simulation environments. And you take these pieces together, the task, the simulation environment, the rubric. That's what becomes a reinforced learning environment. And that's where what these days is called a reinforced learning gyms, where you throw the model and the models go out and they perform the tasks. And then their solutions are evaluated against the rubric. And that happens in runtime with very little human input today. And so the models are learning on the fly, which is why you see them get as smart as they are. A long-winded answer, or to say that if you break it down to the core first principles about how you teach someone something, there isn't that.
But now it's like engineering resources is no longer the resource that you need to protect because you can build it so fast. But then I have this mindset, it's like, well, what do you treat the customer as? Are you treating the customers as guinea pig? So you just have all these guesses, you build this prototype, and it hasn't been tested, and then just throw it raw to the customers. What if your customer have a bad experience and then they never come back again?
Absolutely. So the goal is not just take a bet right away without having some directional conviction on it. You don't partner with any other customer. Every business, every vertical has these early adopters who have the appetite to jump on the bandwagon with you when the industry is going through a disruption. Similarly, pick those customers first. Identifying the right partners, the right champions in your quest to build software faster is one of the key factors in how you will be successful in this strategy of moving really fast and building prototypes first. So when you've identified the right customers, we treat them as partners, guinea pigs. So most of the times, the customers know what their problem is, but they may not know what the right solution for them would be.
That's right. That's why I agree. Like you ask the customer for their pain points and their problem is, but the solution part would be come up with entrepreneurs. I agree with you on this. I just have a problem with like, it's a little bit extreme on like not doing any usability testing at all because the surveys or any product features will tell you what is wrong, but you don't know why it is wrong. And sometimes like you can't take the customer's word for it, because sometimes I'll watch usability testing and they tell me, yeah, this feature is really easy. I love this. I'm just saying, no, I'm watching you. You're struggling. You did it wrong. Like, I'm not saying you're lying in my face. You didn't know, like, I can see it happening in my face. So like without really deeply understanding what's going on, it's just really dangerous for building around people. You're just making a mistake. I mean, this is why I'm seeing like right now there's so many product out there. If you look at the product hunt, thousands of product hunting, product launch every day, and just there's just more and more crappy product out there. And maybe us old school builders was like, we want to build quality product out there that users delighted. So is there a third option there where we can test quickly? Like, sure, there's a vibe coding. Can we do a vibe testing? We can test quickly. Doesn't sacrifice the speed, test quickly. And then also, it's like something in the middle, right? You can test quick, get quick feedback, doesn't sacrifice the speed, also doing testing. I want to understand from your perspective, Irvin, why do you guys give up on testing all along? Is it because testing is way too slow, or is it because it's too expensive? What's the reason there to completely give it up?
First of all, my argument is not to give up testing. My argument is to use testing in a different way. So there are multiple ways you can test. You can test by showing off a low fidelity prototype to the customer, just trying to understand what's the customer journey in solving a particular problem is, and how do you scale it, how do you make it at par when you want to do general availability for those particular features or products. The goal is not to get rid of testing completely. The goal is to use testing in a different way, not to get rid of customer feedback and qualitative feedback around it. So that like, the customer is saying this, I love this feature, but you can clearly see that the customer is struggling with it. The idea is not.
On the other hand, there are people who are like, oh, I love all the data and I want you to give me like everything that you have. I will figure it out because I am going to write my own queries. I love command line kind of thing, right?
Yeah, totally.
So then that was the challenge for us, is how do you satisfy kind of these two extremes? And of course, there are people in the middle who are like, I want this and I want that too. I went from being an applications engineer to running product management to product marketing. And I think when I was doing product management, I looked at it as like, what is that I enjoy the most? And the answer was really this big picture storytelling.
So you said getting feedback from the B2B customers is hard. And the second thing you said is you want to get the feedback, you're getting the feedback as part of your product thing rather than using an external tool to get it. How? But the question is how? Do you have anything that's working for you? Welcome to US Stories. I'm your host, Lee Han Hicken. I've spent my career obsessed with how we actually understand what users actually think. So when Chris and I helped scale usertesting.com from zero to IPO, we thought we had it figured out. But AI has changed everything. The speed of building is now 10 times faster than the speed of listening. So Chris and I built TheySat. We want to use vibe user testing to match the speed of vibe coding. I'm here to talk to visionary leaders who want to deliver great customer experiences to their customers. My guest today is Abhishek Vyas. Great to have you on the show today. Your title is a little bit unique. Your title is Head of Product and Alliance Marketing at CoreLight. You are very unique because you are a rare combination with deep technical expertise. You have a pattern in cryptography. I don't know what that is. You have to tell us what that is. Something with crypto and something with graphy. So very security heavy tech. You are also a gifted storyteller because you actually publish novels, right? And then you also spend a lot of your career in the intersection of deep tech and human stories in large companies like IBM's, Progress, and now I CoreLight. So that's a lot of your whole package. I don't think anyone in our podcast has been, have so unique a mix of a background like this. So tell me a little, our audience, who are you as a product leader, and like how do you combine the tech, the storytelling to build trust in a product that users usually hope that they never actually have to use, right?
Yeah, I mean, actually, we are at an interesting cross section today, especially like, my background has been in cybersecurity. And what we found in cybersecurity for all these years, I mean, originally when you look at vendors, 10, 12 years ago, it was more about, kind of talking about bad things are going to happen to you. So let's work with us so that we can prevent the bad thing from happening. Like from there to we went the other way and kind of started talking about everything under the sun, like work with us so that we can make sure that you never get breached, or I mean, everybody making like this audacious claims.
Right.
And that in fact kind of ate into the users and the buyers trust, right? I mean, you read about your own personal experiences, right? I mean, your data getting breached. I mean, you get probably like one notice per month from somebody, right? Saying, we had a data breach, your data is exposed, and now we are, giving you free credit monitoring service of some sort. So in fact, in my last role at Progress, one of my products called Move It was was compromised by a ransomware gang, and we ended up exposing 300 million records worldwide. It was the highest exploited vulnerability of 2023. So what this means
much just from those small moments of seeing what they touch, what they look at, what they spend time on. And all of that is incredibly rich to us. There's one of my favorite lessons I ever learned early on in product management was the difference between what is a requirement on a piece of paper and what does it mean to a customer. And it deals with this. We were designing something and I had rated in my requirement that it had to weigh, I think it was something like 14 pounds. But I never stopped to really internalize what that was beyond it just saying, hey, this is a 20% reduction in weight than what it was in the prior generation. Customers will love this, and we'll go on. And I never stopped to really go to customers and watch them carry something that is, 14 pounds, carrying it all day, moving it around from place to place. It doesn't matter if it's 20% lighter, that's still heavy. That's still hard. And that's not what their job is. They're not there to move stuff. It's not a gym. And
Right.
so it wasn't until I connected, oh, they're using this to achieve a different goal. I'm actually making it harder for them. And I would never have gotten that, if I just kept it on that piece of paper, if I didn't go out and watch the folks and actually myself create that empathy by trying to move that object. And I really resonate with what you're saying, where if we don't take the time to see our customers in their space, in their element, doing what they're trying to do with our products, we're really going to miss the mark.
Yeah, totally. I have another guest on the show. He went out of the way to create a torture room where it's like a one-way mirror where they just invite customer in to interact with the product, even the website, the page, the pricing page. And then every day the room is booked with executives, PMs, designers watching their customers interact. And it was so painful to watch. And they nicknamed the room torture room. And 2 weeks later, he couldn't find a seat in the room because it's completely booked out. And the executive will commute an hour to see that room. So it was like a huge hit, like an eye-opening for the organization. But you hit a point where like we need to take time to do this. So we all agree this is valuable. But in today's world, we don't have time, right? So how do we, and doing it without is not an option. So how do we do it, but do it in a fast time? Like do it regularly, like because oftentimes people will say, we'll do it when we have time. When we do it, we will as needed on a big project, not every project, not every experiences. So how do we, if I have a magical wand, I would do it with every experiences I launch regularly, like not like a one-off, ongoing observation. So today I'm joined by Phi, head of product at Recidiviz. And Phi, so beyond your impressive titles and your journey of building products, I want to know who are you as a product builder?
Definitely, and hi Lihong and hi to your listeners as well. My identity as a product builder is rooted in the impact that my products have. I care less about how many things get shipped than I do about what changed in the world because of that. What's the so what of it? And so that's shown in my product principles, which I would articulate as personal, empowering, and effortless. Those are the things that I want any product I make to be. And that's always been true since the beginning of my product career, but also just in the work and the goals that we've aligned the team around. And so, for instance, in my past life, not this current role at Recidiviz, but in my previous role at Next Insurance, I led a number of different teams. And no matter what metric I was tasked with driving, whether it's revenue portfolio expansion or retention or some very businessy metric, I turned it into a user outcome metric. And so if, for instance, you want to increase renewals and retention, well, what are the things blocking people from renewing and retaining today? And how might we solve that and give them a better experience that allows them to stay? And so by refocusing teams, I even named my teams. I had a team called Delight, another one called Empower, another one called Thrive. And we really measured our customer satisfaction scores and our net promoter scores most first and foremost. Of course, we reported on revenue and we laddered up into the company goals and all of that. But by refocusing the product and the team on the real user outcome, we were able to create products that were personal, empowering, and effortless, and that were delighting and empowering and letting our users thrive, which drove the outcomes we were looking for. The money always follows when you listen to the users.
Wow. You are very customer-centric product builders. That's a refreshing. That's a great. I mean, in today's world, I feel like with AI, everyone's all about speed build, right? It's refreshing to see like product builders to ground it and thinking about users' delight and thrive. That's awesome. Do you feel like in the last year, given the speed and rapid things changing in our world, do you feel like what are the things you constantly had to unlearn? You feel like job description is changing every single week. Hiring, customer satisfaction, new product roadmap, adopt AI speed. There's so much as you grow, your job description change. Do you feel like you had to unlearn things and empty yourself and relearn things?
All the time, every day. Honestly,
So which type do you think is the right way? Or do you think a combination of the third type should be there?
yeah, I don't think it's quite such a dichotomy for sure. I know the build faster horses or give us faster horses quote, but I think that if Ford had the opportunity and the means to show someone a tangible prototype of a self-propelling carriage, which was the first car, and say, "Do you want this?" They would have had a much easier time saying, "Oh, I would prefer this to faster horses," before even he
Right,
had a chance to build it. And so I think that it's important to have the vision. You have to have
right.
somebody that's vision. I consider myself a very visionary person. I disrupted an entire industry in my last role, and I'm intending to do it again. But I think that you need to ground it in
Yeah.
the reality of where you are. Paint a picture of the car, but give them first a skateboard, and then add a stem to make it a scooter, and then add a shell to make it a, motorcycle, and then add a cage to make it a car. Add value along the way. We all know the idea of build, measure, learn, and agile methodology and MVPs, and I really believe you can marry those. You have to build the vision first and buy them in, but then you have to paint a very clear path of how you're going to get from here to there while adding incremental value along the way. So I do think it has to be both. I'm sorry, it's a cop-out answer, I know.
Yeah, that's great. So it's funny. You said if Henry Ford had ability to show a prototype, well, he could have painted a picture of that, and I guess people wouldn't know what's that picture is. It's the
He
box.
probably
Right?
did. He probably only got the funding to actually develop the thing because he convinced somebody somewhere with a picture. I'm just saying he had to convince somebody.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. Huh. What are some of the most controversial, belief in the UX that most people believe is right, but actually is wrong?
Oh, goodness. Well, that's odd.
Something that you think is right, then you find out, oh, I was wrong, or like something you believe you were like, I don't believe it, and then later on the user proving you wrong.
Ooh, what have the users proved me wrong on? That is helpful. Oh, I see what you're saying. If you had one of these big visionary ideas, what's an example of a time that it was off base and actually you had to adjust to what you really heard on the ground? It's a good question. Oh, I actually have a good one for this. In my last role, I really believed that the ability to, it's like a little bit technical, but in the insurance world, there's a number of like third parties that have an interest in your insurance, whether it's an employer or a person you're working with or for, or, if you're a plumber, then the homeowner has a vested interest in your insurance and these sorts of things. And I really thought that they would want like a digital centralized hub where everyone could kind of see that insurance all together and comment. And what I was correct about was that they wanted a digital hub where they could see the insurance. What I was kind of wrong about was that they wanted the ability to sort of communicate directly in there. I launched a fake door to test that actually. I launched a button that was basically like request modifications, and it just did not receive as much traction or adoption as I anticipated. So we obviously didn't invest too much in that. I followed where the demand was and we released the piece that was helpful, but I thought there would be a lot more there as far as like a whole notifications, and people are going to want to subscribe to different kinds of notifications, and it just didn't end up going that far.
You think people wanted more, but they wanted, okay, it's cool. That's great. Yeah.
We just want
sometimes-
horses,
Yeah, sometimes users would teach things that's unexpected, right?
Yeah.
It's learning human is very fascinating. And it's
One of the things you learn early on is that people don't actually do what they say they would do. And so that's why I think it's important to have multiple of these types of validations, because if you run a survey and you say, would you like the ability?
My guest today is Jason Levine, head of UX for agentic AI experience at AWS. Jason is a true titan in this field. He's overseeing design for AWS's emerging technologies, led global teams at Indeed. And for 14 years, he's been teaching the next generation of designers at the University of Washington. Today, he's building the frameworks for how humans will interact with automatic AI agents. So, Jason, I'm an obsessive learner of people, and you've seen the evolution from static interface and now to AI. So you've seen a lot. With all that history, what is the one fundamental human truth that remains constant, even with the user today is now the AI agent acting on their behalf?
Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, I've been doing this for quite a while. And the goal has always been the same, and that's to make the user need for reaching their goal as efficient and as intuitive as possible. And the only difference that I see in what we're now doing with these new tools is that we can now innovate faster and we can be more contextual. So I can actually achieve those ends without having to be monolithic about it, which is how we kind of had to do before. When you would build something, you had to just make the assumption it was good enough for everyone else, even if they weren't exactly your persona. And now I could have it adapt with agentic AI to that persona or to that workflow. So it's essentially the same role that we've always had. It's just now we're using a different tool to do it.
Interesting, Jason. It sounded very easy from your mouth, but let's break it down. So
Sure.
it sounded very sci-fi. So what is the new product now, and what is your new target audience now? Like, from our audience purpose, like, who are you building it for? You sounded like the same. I feel like, wait a moment, the customer is not a human anymore? Like, tell me more about it.
And so if I do AI right, then it is adapting to each one of those users as well as in the organization they're in for what the security needs are, what the roles might be, what the workflow requirements are of how those roles are distributed. And so now what I can do is leveraging AI, I can then have people, instead of having to adapt to the software, can adapt to them. And that's
Whoa,
really...
wait a moment. You're saying as a customer, I'll have a VIP experience every time? Where I have like an AI servant who knows me, exactly me, every time I log in?
Yes.
Whoa, that's like a holy grail. That seems amazing.
It's
Really?
yeah. So what that means is for UX designers, our role is the only way that our role is changing is that the persona we own for our customers, we can now break that into roles within those personas and then make sure that the guidelines and the frameworks of the AI is adapted to that, as opposed to the way that we used to do it before is you would kind of like peanut butter spread across what you had as multiple needs and then force
Right.
them into a single process to do it.
Yeah,
And
then you have
so,
like a persona 1, persona 2, persona 3, and then you had to fit into, now you can be like unique. You can be like, you are you. You no longer be like the numbers, the digits.
correct.
Persona 1, persona 2, you can be Jason Levi. I can be Lee Hong Heken. I'm unique. Wow, that is fascinating.
And then the other cool thing that you can do now that we can do generative AI applications is that it used to be extremely expensive to have custom code and custom products. And
Right.
instead, I can create steering docs that I give to the AI agent to build the application from. And then I give it the additional context for how it is then applied. So I'll give you a simple example. I'm introducing for my class an AI agent to speak to that has taken all 100 hours of my lectures, turn them into transcriptions, and then now that information is essentially the database that it is using to make feedback when my students then use the app. So they can get feedback on their assignments. And so instead of having to talk to a TA, they can talk to a virtual me. Now, here's where it gets cool is that, so UW is on a quarterly basis. And
Right.
I'm reaching out to potentially speak at or teach at Carnegie Mellon, and CMU is on a semester system. And so that means I will have more that I'll have to have as curriculum for the semester program versus a quarter. It's, it's 6 months versus 3 months, which means that I have to build a different version of that entire teaching tool
Wow.
for that class. And before, that would be another 6 months of development effort. Instead, I take the steering doc from my UW class, apply it here, tell it the new information to work from, and then it'll build a more contextual version just for that class, where that would never be possible before. So not only can I have it adapt to each user and keep memory of what are the ways that you respond best for actions and what are the things that you need to get done versus what we have is available to you to get done, so it becomes prioritized. But now I also
Right.
can build custom apps.
Wow.
So fast forward, we had built this thing. We're about 3 months from launch, and I was at a birthday party with a friend of mine, and he was talking about his son, and he was complaining how his son was in a band and took a shortcut to get home. And so he took his trumpet that was in a case and threw it over a fence so he could climb it. And he was mad at his son because it cost him $200 to fix, because his son thought just because it's in a case, that meant that the trumpet would be
safe.
fine.
Yeah.
But of course it got dented. And I had this epiphany, oh my God, the renter is not the person who's renting it. The parent may be paying for the rental, but the actual instrument
User.
is being rented by a kid. And the kid's going to do stupid things like throw things over a fence. And they're going to change their mind and pout that they don't want to go to lessons anymore. And so when I had that realization, I was realizing the engine was built with this reliable customer in mind, when it can't be for that reliable customer, it's for their child. And that meant we
Yes.
had to have an entirely different approach for the quality of the equipment, because it's going to get dented when it's returned, and the insurance pattern, and have the return policies. We had to change all of that. And it was because of the single insight. And it requires
Right.
that insight for all the other data we were looking at to then make sense in a different way.
Right. Maybe today I'm joined by Jason Moore, head of user experience at Planful. Jason, beside the impressive titles, I want to know deep down, who are you as a product builder? So looking back at your last year, who are you as your product builder, and what's the hardest thing you feel like you had to unlearn because you feel like the job description is changing every single week?
Yeah, great question. And I think that's one that I think most of us might start our day with each and every morning. What are we going to be today? I think most recently I would really kind of brand myself as an organizational designer. Being in kind of the enterprise B2B space, I find myself getting an opportunity to lead teams of designers and researchers and content professionals. And so I really start every day by really asking the question of, how can I help my team be more successful in what they're doing? How can I provide them more air cover at the C-suite? to not only be recognized for the great work that they're doing and the hours where they deliver things that look like it could have been done in just a couple minutes, and really helping to support. And I think as a leader, I really always start with the why. And early in my career as an IC, I often struggled with, why am I building this thing or this experience or solving this particular problem? And so I think if you were to ask a core philosophy of mine, it really stems from the fact of, I need everyone on the team to understand why we're moving in a particular direction, especially when there's disagreement, because obviously everyone has an opinion. But when you work with larger companies and larger teams, the more that you can help people understand the why, the greater opportunity you give them to really own that area of responsibility. And the more that they feel that ownership, you tend to get better results.
That's very thoughtful. So you basically help your team find the purpose and meaning of their work. That's actually really great. It must feel so great, feel like their work has some meaning. They design things that users love. Why are we doing this?
That's right.
That's really awesome. I guess things are changing so much.
Mhm.
There's a vibe design. There's a concept of
Right.
vibe. Now you can
And then in the same breath complain that they don't feel respected and have a seat at the table. And my advice to any UX professional is, if you want a seat at the table, you only have so many hours in the day. You got to get out from behind the keyboard, especially in this remote world that we're living in. I live in the state of Montana. There's only 1 million people in the entire state. If I spend all my time sitting behind my monitor and not talking with users and spending the face time with them, I'm going to lose. And so you have to be very, very intentional. That doesn't mean that you can't be that designer sitting behind the screen. You just have to understand that you're creating a place in the world that's going to limit opportunities in the long run. And so, I think you just have to be really honest and take an assessment of where you want to go in your career. And if you're someone that wants to have that opinion and to have those conversations, then you got to figure a way to automate yourself away from Figma and spending more time with the human interaction.
totally right. When you are describing that, I immediately have images of that designer in my head.
Of course. I think we all do. We could do crazy eights and sketch all those out. And I bet ours would look very similar.
Sometimes those designers are the ones that we really respect and very genius ones, right?
Right.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's go through some rapid fire questions and
Okay.
then go from there. So, what's your usability testing stack look like right now?
Oh, usability stack. I've used a lot. I mean, usertesting.com is one, Dovetail. I would say probably one of my weaknesses when I think about my UX tool belt is actually usability testing.
Okay.
When I get asked that question, I say, well, one thing I'd like to get better at is the usability testing. I'm much more comfortable in the quantitative space. So I would say my stack is really finding the most talented researchers that I can, learning from them, and then making sure I'm providing them cover.
Okay, so how big is your research team now? Okay, I heard a lot of people say they're cutting the research team, Is
Yeah.
your team's getting cut or more now?
I would say right now at Planful, it's the smallest team, and I don't want to go into specific numbers, but it is definitely the smallest team that I've overseen in the last 12 years. It has nothing to do with AI or the synthetic users. That really just has to do with helping them kind of have the aha moment on why research is so important. So when I think about the life cycle of design, in the beginning, people didn't really understand why we needed designers. And then that kind of proved itself out. And then research was kind of the next box we uncovered. Why do I need research? Oh, well, here's why. That's why you need really strong leadership to help the executives see it. And then
So, Manish, I am a obsessive learner of people, but you deal with the invisible UX, like the encryptions and the security that user never sees until it fails, right? Until it fails, then it's all your fault. Too much
You
pressure
just
on
said it
you.
very well.
Yeah. So in a world where trust is the most important part of the experience, and what is the vibe of the security? How do you know when a product feels safe to a customer?
That's a great question. And well, before I get into the weights there, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm looking forward for this conversation here. You touched on a very important aspect, trust, because that's exactly where I personally plug in myself into.
When you talk about precisely payments, if I may touch base on that, when you talk about payments, what you
Yeah.
talk about is the experience that I walk in wherever, ATM, point of sale terminal, whatever. I tap in my card, I tap in my phone, and everything just works. Nobody ever thinks about what happens in the back end. And what I expertise, or what we expertise here, is to create that exact same experience for the user without letting the user worry about all the different mechanics of what is happening in the back end, how many players are involved, and so on, and building that trust in a dynamic space.
My guest today is Mazen, Head of Product at Alkami Technology. Mazen has an incredible track record of leading massive product organizations at Capital One, Cox Automotive, and Credit Acceptance. He's a leader who understands how to scale complex digital experiences in industry where trust and position are everything. Mazen, beyond your Harvard Business School degree and your leadership titles, our audience want to know, who are you as a product builder? What's your mission? What do you dedicate yourself in building? What kind of product, what kind of legacy you want to leave behind in as a product builder?
Yeah, I love that question because it's sort of soul searching. And the truth is that for me, and that might be maybe somewhat controversial, is it starts with actually wanting to make a difference somewhere. I find that the best product folks are people that are on some kind of a mission. They see something that is not quite right, or they look at the world through eyes that think, well, we could do better than that. And then you end up in a position where you're transformative. Now, I'm going to use a cliche, for example, like Steve Jobs, right? You know, he was obsessed with the idea of transforming how an individual interacts with computing and had many failures, right? Before getting into the iPhone, which arguably was, you know, his transformative success. But before that came Lisa. And before that came, I can't remember the name of that tablet that was terrible. Like that was in the 90s, right? But for
Yeah.
him, it started with an obsession of transformative experiences, right? Because I separate building from incremental improvement. With platforms like user testing, you could do A/B testing really quick and you can just do incremental improvements, but everything has to be in service to a much larger whole that's driving you and you're obsessed with. So for me, I look at things and I have this deep obsession in a couple of places. One of them is the automotive space. I think the automotive space is still kind of broken, and I still want to do something about it. And then the other place that I think things aren't as good as they could be, let's just say, is finance. You've got asymmetry of information. You've got challenges in regulation. You've got things that are deeply personal for people, right? You know, talking about how much money you make in the United States is a very, you know, personal thing, right? And so at the intersection of all of these things, you know, it comes a market that is, you know, capital markets are relatively efficient, but at the individual level, maybe less so.
And if you want to match the speed of vibe coding with vibe user testing, visit us at theysaid.io. And you can sign up a free account to try vibe user testing. I'm Lee Hong Hicken, and this is UX Stories.